All right, you guys ready? Okay, so gonna recap, right? All right, so in part 2, Disco Jockey had no. This I'm telling you what happened in part 2. So to recap, what happened in part 2, Disco Jockey got the golden buzzer, and everybody was like, "Disco, disco," and he couldn't believe it. And his favorite judge gave him a hug, and everything was good. And he got up the next day, and it felt like a dream. He couldn't believe how excited he was that he'd gotten the golden buzzer, and he was going straight to the live shows in Hollywood. But when he got up, remember, and he was walking around the house, he saw his dad. No, wait. No, I'm thinking of the beginning of part 2.
And he saw the bad guy.
Well, anyway, he was talking to his dad. No, there's no bad guy. He was talking to his dad, and he's like, "Dad, what am I going to do for the next month, right? While I wait for the live shows to start." And that's when I said, "To be continued." All right.
I know definitely what he should do.
All right.
Say it.
Part 3. His dad had the idea that he was going to send Disco Jockey to rock and roll camp.
What?
Yes, rock and roll camp. It's like summer camp. It's got all the regular stuff that summer camp has, like a lake and canoeing and
Except rock and roll.
horseback riding and archery. And a whole lot of rock and roll. And
And
it was,
that thing starting pillow.
yep, and that too. So, I don't know. So Disco Jockey was like, "Oh, Dad, I'm so excited. This is gonna be great. This way, I'll have lots of chance to practice my rock and roll skills, and maybe even write some new songs, and I'll get to have fun." And the dad's like, "Yeah, you leave next weekend." So all week long, he was just pumped. He would get up in the morning, rock out on his favorite guitar, practice, write songs, because
Daddy, which guitar did he have?
the one that he found in his dad's secret man cave, remember?
The black one?
Yeah, the coolest guitar in the whole world, shaped like a lightning bolt. Remember?
Oh, yeah. And with lightning on it?
And with lightning on it. And so he just played and played, and he packed, and he was so excited to go to rock and roll camp. He just couldn't wait. Finally, the day came.
And then he had drummers.
What? Okay, hold on.
He said drummers.
Drummer. Okay, let me tell my story, please. Let me tell my story. So finally the day came, and he was all packed and ready to go, and his dad's like, "All right, hop in the car, Disco. We're going to rock and roll camp." Yeah. So they get in the car and they start driving, and they had this thing that they did now where Disco Jockey, because he could not put down his electric guitar. It was like a part of him now. Even while he was sitting in the back seat of the van, he would practice the guitar, and his dad, and there was a cord, and he could plug the electric guitar into the auxiliary plug-in on the van's audio system. So anybody who was in the car could just like totally rock out to whatever Disco was playing. So the whole drive to camp, he's like, just like all kinds. Yep, just like that. So they got, finally, after a couple hours in the car, to rock and roll camp. And his dad got him all registered and got his bag and his guitar and his amplifier all set up in his cabin.
Amplifier.
It's what you plug your electric guitar into so you can make
Loud
amplify the sound. Yeah, make it real loud. He gave his dad a hug goodbye, and then started one of the greatest rock and roll weeks of his entire life. Now, he was still like so happy that he'd gotten the golden buzzer, and people even knew who he was at rock and roll camp. They're like, "Hey, that's that kid Disco Jockey who got the golden buzzer." And so he was already kind of like half famous when he got to rock and roll camp.
Power Rangers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then he met his counselor.
I can't know what they're carrying.
No. His counselor's name was...
Little Jackson.
What?
I said Michael Jackson.
his counselor's name was actually, that's what I was going to say, Michael Jackson, right? The king of pop. And remember, he was already, Disco Jockey was already being called the Prince of Rock and Roll. So it only makes sense that the king of pop would be his camp counselor. It wasn't the actual Michael Jackson. It was the guy guys, let me tell my story. It was the guy whose name was coincidentally Michael Jackson, but he was an awesome rock and roller, and he made a great camp counselor.
Nice.
So they started doing like all their regular camp stuff. Sure. And they did archery and tomahawk throwing, and he spent some time on the canoe. And then they had their first jam session. So they would mix all the kids up, and like they would put electric guitarists, they would spread them out, drummers and keyboard players and bass guitarists and all the orchestra instruments, right? That giant drum thing and the thing with all the bells and the brass instruments and the string instruments. Anyway, like the trumpet and the bugle. And I don't know. The Doritos.
And the dummies.
All right, hold on. All right, listen. And so they would have jam sessions. And like every day they had like 3 full hours worth of jam sessions all spread out. And everybody was just electrified by Disco Jockey's guitar playing skills. But there was this other camper in one of the girl cabins who was probably most enamored by his guitar playing. Not only did she love his guitar playing, but she actually thought he was kind of handsome too. And her name was Susie Smiles. Susie Smiles actually was a percussionist. She played the xylophone and the drums. Basically anything you can bang against something else and make a cool sound or a rhythm out of it. The cymbals, yeah. Susie Smiles was all about the percussion. And so as the days of the camp went on, they started being able to form their own little band groups within jam sessions, because it's basically an art camp, right? And they want to promote artistic freedom.
Daddy, but the electric guitar people, the electric guitar kids, they have to be the leader of the whole band.
Not necessarily. I mean, leaders emerge in different groups in various ways, right? It could be the drummer. It's not necessarily the lead singer, right? There were singers there too. But anyway, so it turned out that Disco Jockey just absolutely loved jamming out with Susie Smiles. Sometimes they would stay up till all hours of the night, just the two of them, strumming on the electric guitar and playing the drums and writing songs. And they were just, I mean, it was just a hoot. So it was like the fourth day of camp, and they were out doing horseback riding in the morning. And Susie Smiles, she was on a horse called Sally.
He was on a horse called Lightning.
No. Check this out. Disco Jockey was on a horse called Yargaloopsy. Yargaloopsy was kind of a wily horse, but Disco Jockey loved horse riding when he wasn't jamming out on his guitar. Yeah, I know, right? But he's like, don't worry, I can handle this horse. So they're riding all around the trails, and him and Susie Smiles are yucking it up, and all the kids are having fun.
Yucking it?
Yuck, that just means like joking around and having fun.
And
talking.
It?
My shoulder.
Oh.
So at one point, Disco Jockey, he reaches around to like pet Yargaloopsy. Yargaloopsy didn't see him. I mean, he knew he was on him, but he's used to seeing someone in front of him. He didn't know what was like touching his face. Yargaloopsy turned back and bit Disco's finger. And he bit it hard. It hurt. He heard a crunch. And it was like painful. He screamed. He didn't know if his finger was broken or what. Like for a second it felt like he'd gotten his finger bit off. That's how much it hurt. And it was on his left hand. His the hand that he uses to like pick all the notes on the electric guitar. And he screamed and he fell off Yargaloopsy. And Susie Smiles ran up to him and she's like, What happened? What happened, Disco? He's like, oh, Yargaloopsy bit me. And then the counselors ran over. And so everybody was really worried. So they put him in like the camp golf cart. and they took him back to the infirmary or the nurse's station, and they checked out the finger. It wasn't broken, but it was really, really hurt. So they wrapped it up in a bandage. They wrapped up his whole hand so he couldn't move his hand. And that's when the reality struck. Number one, he wouldn't be able to play electric guitar until his hand healed up. But even worse than that, the live shows were just next week after camp. If his finger wasn't going to be good for that, then he wouldn't be able to go on the live shows and he wouldn't have a chance to win the $1 million and go on TV again. He was so worried. I mean, winning the Golden Buzzer was amazing, but it didn't mean anything if you didn't go on and win the show or at least get to compete in the live shows so people could see your raw talent on live TV. You know what I'm saying? He was so bummed. He spent the entire next day not even doing all the camp stuff. He didn't want to go to the lake. He even missed a meal. And, there's no way he could do archery, right? Or he didn't feel like going on a hike. None of that stuff. He was just down and out. And usually, by that point, what he did when he was feeling sad or bummed, he'd pick up his dad's electric guitar, and he would, jam out on a little song, and it'd always make him feel better.
Play electric guitar.
And now he couldn't play, and he was super sad. So it was around sunset on that second to last day, and it was the last day, the last full day at camp, because the next day the parents would be picking him up. Then he'd have to show his bandaged up hand to his dad, be like, "Dad, I don't think I can do the show." And it was just all piled up in his mind and on his heart. So it was around sunset on the last full day, and he went out to this area that was like a little ways away from the cabins, and he climbed up into his favorite climbing tree, and it had like this long branch where he could sit up and watch the sunset over the lake, and he just sat there just like thinking about stuff. And then he heard this noise down at the bottom of the tree, and he looked down. And who was it? None other than Susie Smiles. And she looked up at him. She said, "Hey, Disco, what are you doing up there?" He said, "Oh, nothing." She said, "Hold on." She had something like slung on her back, but he didn't know what it was. So Susie Smiles, she climbed up the tree, and she sat next to him. And she said, "What's the matter, Disco?" He said, "You know what's the matter." She goes, "Yeah, I know. That's really awful what happened to you, and I really hope that your finger heals up fast so that you can go on the AGT live shows." And he was just like down and droopy. And she said, "Hey, I brought you something." She said, "I know you've been like taking off the wrap and trying to play guitar and not being able to do it, but I thought maybe if I gave you a little bit of encouragement, you could maybe like overcome the pain and maybe you would see that it wasn't that bad and you could still play." He's
Wait,
like,
Daddy,
"What?"
You know it should be strapped to her back? It was a small thing, though.
Hold on, let me tell my story.
Oh, I was thinking of pick.
So he says, "Well, what could possibly encourage me to take off the bandage and try again? It hasn't worked any other time." So she reaches behind her back. Guess what was slung behind her back? A brand new miniature ukulele. A ukulele. It wasn't as heavy as a guitar, but with his amazing prodigy guitar playing skills, he could probably learn it in like less than a minute. He's like, "Wow, I've never played the ukulele before." She said, "Come on, give it a try." He's like, "No, I don't think I can." And that's when she reached out her hand and she held his hand. And he said,
Is her hand?
No, his good hand. And he didn't say anything. He just kind of smiled, and the sun was setting, and it was beautiful. And she leaned over. She pulled his hand. She leaned over, and she gave him a kiss on the cheek.
Lips.
No, it was the cheek. And so he smiled, and he said, "All right, Susie, I'll give it a try." Susie Smiles, always good at making people smile. So he took the bandage off his hand just as the sun was about to finish setting. He grabbed the yeah. Oh no. No, his finger did not fall off. He grabbed the brand new yeah.
Oh, poop! My finger fell off.
He grabbed the brand new ukulele that she'd just gotten for him.
It had poop on it.
He held it in his hands.
It had poop in it.
He put his hand up to the bow or whatever you call the part that sticks out.
A tuner.
And he started trying to play. And then, wouldn't you know it, it was just like if his finger had never even been bitten. He was just so encouraged by Susie Smiles, and mostly the kiss on the cheek. No, Susie Smiles. That he started playing. And he realized within a minute that not only his finger felt better, but he could play the ukulele like nobody's ever played the ukulele before. And he just played and played, and as the sun finished setting, Susie Smiles threw her arm around him and nuzzled her head against his shoulder, and he played her a sweet lullaby as they finished the sunset. Two young rock and rollers in love at summer rock and roll camp. So he was so happy that night when he went to sleep. His finger felt better, and he found out Susie Smiles liked him, and things were going really good. So the next day, his dad picked him up, and he just could not wait to tell his dad about everything that had happened. And the dad's like, I know you're excited to tell me, son, and I want to hear the whole thing. But listen to this. We don't even have time to go home. We've got to go straight to Hollywood because it's going to take us that long to get there, and you've got to get there for the live show. We've got to go straight there. So they started driving, and the whole drive to Hollywood, Disco Jockey was telling his dad all about camp, and Yargaloopsy biting his finger, and what's that?
That's just one hand name.
Yeah. And it was awesome. So they got to Hollywood, right? They go up to the big theater where they're gonna have the live shows are getting ready to start, and then he looks across the waiting area to where all the other performers are.
Wow.
And that's when he sees it. And he can't believe his eyes. No, it was actually something that kind of terrified him, like in a bad way. He was genuinely scared and worried and anxious, and he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw To Be Continued in Part 4.
I think when you said Daddy, you know what I
What?
I think it's another rock and roller.
Yeah.